Slow living movement on social media invites us to escape the cyclical trap of working long hours at a job that mostly serves someone's fat wallet, of living in a place that is removed from natural world, of working just to be busy, of empty hobbies that eat up our brains instead of nourishing them. The alternative is the opposite. These influences show you the most serene landscapes with melodic sounds of crickets and running streams, the perfect cups of tea on embroidered plates, the constant walks to unwind from their work that already has flexible schedule. It's like being in a space that our ancestors knew so well and took for granted. Indeed, our ancestors were peacefully attuned to nature, but it was only a handful few, the rich, who lived the type of lifestyle that slow living influences show today. The things they had in common was no industrialized environment and obviously no stimulating media, but they didn't express how overstimulated they were by social company or took pleasure trips to get away from it all. They enjoyed everyday experiences that included harvests, inexpensive celebrations with loved ones, building homes and barns together. These are the unsung heroes we don't study much in history classes, and instead focus on eccentric kings and queens, bored wealthy poets, and composers with scandalous relationships. People who live according to their natural human rhythm, but in a simple, humble way, still exist today, but they don't show off much. Farmers and country folk, including Mennonites and the Amish, anyone who works in a forest providing wood while preserving trees, fishermen. Perhaps some factions of these professions have been industrialized, but sustainable types still exist. I had the privilege of spending my childhood summers in such environments, among my grandparents in Russia and Ukraine back in the 90s. My paternal grandparents lived in a small town, but they had a dacha in a countryside that they built with their own hands. They spent much of their time farming, appreciating the life cycle of their plants, and creating delicious food and drinks from it. They read books instead of watching TV, walked, cycled, took a bus instead of driving a car. But they also enjoyed a good company of family and friends, passed on wisdoms to us, the grandkids, wore clean, practical clothes that didn't try to make a fashion statement, and also lived in houses that were appropriate to their family size. I want to talk about this less talked about, but I think more valuable form of slow living, and encourage you to seek it out in your lives instead of the more manicured type. I know most of us, including myself, live in urban or suburban spaces, but that's not a big deal. Maybe you'll move to a small town or a hamlet one day. But for now, I encourage you to think about the heart of simple living, about being present in the things you do, and also about openness and warmth. I took a few notes from these two books to help me organize my thoughts. A Reasonable Life by Ferenc Mattei from 1993, and An Oldie But a Goodie, Living More with Less from 1980 by Doris Longacre. Longacre, in particular, despite being a Mennonite who lived on a farm, inspired readers to live organically anywhere. Her books include testimonies from people from all walks of life. Both types of slow living talk about the problems with hustle culture, like trying to be on top of the ladder, social environments that lack compassion, and also having much of what you contribute being put into the pockets of wealthy bosses and investors who aren't really involved with their company much. But while the modern sentiment says to try to do less, to have fewer ambitions, it overlooks the fact that work itself, maybe working a lot even, can be a good thing. Mattei, for example, draws an example of a hard-working owner of a farm in Tuscany, Italy, an elderly man who is strong and healthy because of his way of life. He started his work at 6 in the morning to feed the animals and milk the cows. He tended to his garden along with his wife and many assistants for most of the day. He also had satisfying large meals in between, consisting of homegrown food. What distinguishes his work from the corporate stuff we're used to is that he was intimately connected to it, didn't rush the pace, and savored every moment of it. And above all, was surrounded by a natural environment full of life. He also had a large family in a multi-generational home, a lifestyle which also involves work. While not every slow-living influencer is alone or living in a VIP-style arrangement with just their partner and a pet, Madison Gray, for example, being a wonderful exception, most of them seem to associate slow living with maximizing relaxation. So they might shy away from these organic, human types of work. But work itself is not what prevents us from living simply. It's the type of work, as Longacre writes, that disconnects us from our humanity. And also our anxious, confused minds that became all jumbled up thanks to the so-called progress. Most of our ancestors had solid family and communal structures. It was mostly the rich, whose history informs us of their boredom and dysfunction, with notable exceptions here and there. Both Mattei and Longacre write that throughout history, humans were always out there for one another, building barns, homes, longhouses, hunting, tending to the wounded, sharing stories and songs, and also modeling skills to the young. No, it wasn't all perfect. People still made enemies. Some were very vicious. But the least they had is that they knew their enemies very well. I still remember our neighbors from that Ukrainian village who desperately wanted my grandma's land. Boy, were they mean. And yet they knew plenty of people with whom they felt kinship. There were struggles, forgiveness, and reciprocity. Nowadays, we just project our insecurities that we accumulated from interactions with unkind people onto most humans. So slow living in a form of isolation or VIP relationships seems like the default way to go. Even those who haven't found their partner yet or have a dysfunctional family can still go out there and get involved with the community to train that sense of kinship that our ancestors used to have. But it doesn't have to be about feeling overwhelmed with humanity as a whole. You just need to have an open heart and figure out where to look. What most influencers show is not actually simple. Sure, they might say they don't buy many clothes, or that they don't consume their time with online shopping, but they still have too much. For example, homes with many rooms but few people to occupy them, maybe even multiple properties as investments. It can be private pools, stylish furniture, expensive cosmetics. I'm not saying that people in the past were absolute minimalists or that you shouldn't live in an aesthetically pleasing place. But like I said, don't forget the human element. Make sure that human life influences your material space. For example, pleasure shopping trips that take away time from spending it with your loved ones, as Longacre wrote. Things that people use when they're fresh, but then get bored with and abandon. This happens a lot with children's toys or clothes that are all about the current trend. Perhaps including timeless materials like clay and paints, books, and a few sets of open-ended toys, and also classy, simple clothes that every generation enjoys would be more ideal. And once you got enough, don't go further. This one's tricky because our nature-dwelling, rural and small-town ancestors didn't travel much. But to say that we shouldn't visit foreign countries at all is absurd. But what we can learn from them is that those humble forms of fun should be the largest piece of the pie. You know, enjoying simple local life with occasional novelty seeking. For example, visiting local forests, meadows, farms, markets, beaches. Inviting neighbors for a communal feast, where there are more gifts of participation than store-bought gifts. Songs, jokes, tales, dances, with a few oopsie moments. It just seems that modern advocates of slow living equate slow living with maximizing relaxation, hence their distaste for natural families and working hard. As for travel, they might be showing off photos and videos from their various trips abroad, the expensive restaurants that they visited, the hotels they stayed at. A simplified approach to distant travel, according to testimonies from Longacre's book, involves being mindful of the businesses you support, for example, buying food from market stalls, staying at bed and breakfast inns, and also buying from small shops. It also involves enjoying sights in person, without the persistent need to take the perfect photo or video. If slow living is being in touch with your human spirit, then it's natural to experience and value those moments in life that connect us to our fellow humans. That's why I love the approaches in those two books. They're not about slow living for the sake of being relaxed, but for the sake of feeling vibrant, alive as a human, both as an individual but also in a community of others. This goes beyond romance and sex. It's an important area to work on as a couple, but even those who have mastered intimacy with their partners may remain aloof to other forms of intimacy with humans that are just as important because they connect us to our shared life force. It starts with touch, hugging your family members and friends, holding your child's tiny hand. It also involves having genuine conversations with your loved ones, being empathetic, and involve language that reflects this empathy. Not to say that there won't ever be friction or discomfort, perhaps a few misunderstandings, but love should be a building block in all of the pieces. If all else fails, just be stoic. Intimacy also includes feeling connected to the pain of those in need, giving to the community materially or through your presence. This is the big piece of Longacre's book, living by humble means, so you can share the surplus with the rest. And lastly, it's appreciating our cycles of life, being by the side of those that pass to another world, multi-generational homes where you're witness to all stages of life and reflecting on your own growth. Birth of children, how they flourish. I have 3 and I'm still deeply touched by how hard they fought for their survival as newborns, especially my middle one who was born premature. Bless their hearts. Both types of slow living have these things in common. The big one is consuming little or none of stimulating media, like internet, TV, and obnoxious music. The other one is reading more. Sure, most of our rural ancestors weren't literate, but they still shared songs and oral tales among one another. My grandparents, a newer generation, read a lot. It might seem that with all the labor they did that they had no time for reading, but actually it's the media that takes time away from that, not the work. Solitude also works like that. In slow living, we emphasize the importance of processing thoughts in a calm environment to unwind, to enjoy our own company. Could be in nature or in a quiet room. And surely, as Matei wrote, all the rural folk that he interacted with spent time every day just sitting on a porch or taking a walk just to do that. And yet the modern approach tells us that others' company makes it impossible for this to happen. Like they're not compatible with their wishes to take a break. So these people curate their own lives to maximize solitude. I believe that's a sign of social anxiety beyond simple introversion. Too much overthinking, a little direct communication, where we would request others to give us these moments. I don't think we should be competing with one another for personal space, but rather see the value in both types of situations. Like I said, you don't have to move to the countryside to appreciate the value of slow living. The reason why Matei writes that is mostly due to the environmental reasons, but also because of all the stimulation and noise that stresses our brains. Longacre, on the other hand, emphasizes the heart more, suggesting that all of these actions, including peaceful rhythm and sustainability, start with us wanting them to happen, and then doing the best we can. So adjust the approach to your own life. I'm certainly not your ideal slow living coach, but here's a list of things I'm working on every day and becoming better at. Using mundane work like house cleaning, washing dishes, sorting, cooking, and such as opportunities to reflect. My hands are already used to these motions, but my mind is always awake. That's why I enjoy these activities. They're almost therapeutic in a sense, and lots of my content ideas have been born this way. Spending time outdoors as a family, connecting with one another and with the living environment, such as country or parks. Family dinners. While my boys are young, they can be silly and unintentionally messy, but the lighter the mind, the easier it is to have fun and not take any accidents to heart. Simple and spacious interior design that is appropriate to the ages of people living at home. Dressing tastefully, not treating shopping like a hobby, not being bothered by my lack of outfit variety. Eating food slowly without having some entertainment. Being a homemaker. I know this word has gotten some heat lately, though it has lots of appeal because I can see the immediate results of my work, like a cozy house, healthy meals, and simple games. Gardening also has a similar effect, though I don't have time for it yet. Being a source of calm emotions. Yes, even when a child or another adult tries to trigger me. Being unbothered yet valuing kindness is amazing. Reading more, breathing more, watching less. Though, as a YouTuber, I still have to be in tune with other content out there, just not too much. I'm sure there are more, but I just wanted to go with everyday, commonplace examples instead of the usual image of slow living you see online. And if you're working a 9-to-5 job, I'd be curious to find out how you apply a calm rhythm to your life. Don't stress out too much if it's different compared to others. Remember, slow living starts here, and a life planning will follow. As usual, I enjoy challenging people to reflect more. Being uncomfortable with nuances of life is a natural part of growth. The gifts of this process are on the other side. So, take care, my gentle friends, and see you again soon.